Is that cleared up now, or is that still?
It's still ongoing, to be honest. I've only just seen someone who's been like researching it, so like it's taken me like 2 years to see someone for it.
Wow.
And I'm gonna have like a full check over and like brain scans and stuff. But they say like unless they're like looking at this trial, like this first trial that they're doing now, and unless you've got these special things where you can proper zoom in on the scans, they're all coming back as normal. But it costs so much to like do a proper scan like that. But you know, they're only being able to do it for a select few people to like have a look at like into your brain and see like what's going on. It's mad.
So what are the symptoms? What is long COVID like?
It was weird. Like I was fine. After COVID, I just felt a bit like I got it back when it first got here, like in 2020. And I got it just after Christmas when it was just starting to make the news, but it obviously already got to the UK. I felt really like I couldn't do as much as I used to be able to do, like walking and stuff. And I just felt really fatigued. And like, I tried to battle through it. And about 2 months, like after I had it, I just got like crippling vertigo. I had to take myself to hospital. Thought I was dying. Yeah, it was weird. It's like burning in the soles of my feet, like tingling down my face, like I was having a stroke.
It's funny. I actually had that after I got the second vaccine. The tingling.
Yeah, I think that. What vaccine did you have?
Pfizer.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that must be like a side effect of, I don't know what it is, but it was it just wouldn't like go, and then like nausea, dizziness, feeling of impending doom all the time. It was really weird. Yeah,
I remember you getting up at like 3 a.m. and like, because through the first lockdown we were like sharing Ollie's living room, and I remember you getting up at like 3 a.m. like feeling the walls because you couldn't walk in a straight line. Like,
and that lasted. It didn't. The thing is about it is it just lasts a fucking long time, like such a long time. And it takes such a long time to kind of calm down. And I also had like crippling migraines like every day. So like, and I never get headaches. So to go from no headaches to a migraine whenever you concentrate, it was horrible, you know. I had to relearn my craft. Like my coordination was fucked up. Like it was just really strange. Never experienced anything like it. It really does affect the brain, I think. If it is a long COVID you're suffering from, they think it must cross the blood-brain barrier.
How have you managed to make an album throughout this?
I honestly don't know. Well, to be honest, sometimes it was the only thing keeping me going, because otherwise I was just focusing on how much pain I was in. So when I was thinking, okay, I can make this album, it was sort of like taking me away from that to an extent, you know.
Because you've pretty much been working on this for the 2 years. Because I remember seeing photos on Instagram from February 2020 when you were already working on the record.
Yeah, it's been about a 2 year process.
It's because we almost finished the album just before the first lockdown, and then halfway through we decided to scrap half of that album because it just didn't feel right. Like we'd done Moth to a Flame last
as the closing track, or just the song you did.
So it always felt like an opener, but it was like one of the last ones we did in terms of recording, and it just felt like, geez, this is our sound. Like this is the thing that we've been working towards, and now everything has to meet this pillar.
And most bands, you know, it'll be like tough shit, you know.
Yeah,
you've still got to release it.
But then also, like in any other circumstance as well, like we could have just like if the momentum was going the right way, then we might have actually done that, because we didn't have the time to reflect and sit with it. But with lockdown we did, and it was just like, right, this doesn't match up, and so I ended up losing half the album, and then kind of starting to write again throughout lockdown and just recording as we got them.
Yeah,
that half of the album that you scrapped, how different was it to what we're hearing today?
It was really different, and we weren't happy with it. You know, we knew deep down that it wasn't right, it wasn't good enough.
Because we had like a previous incarnation of the band, which was more country anyway. And so the album we thought would just be a collection of like a few years worth of writing, but it wasn't where we were at that point. It was it just felt like we had dragged some songs from the past into this new era. And so there was like, I don't know, like it was just a bit too, it felt like a pastiche of the things that we liked rather than the things like an honest or authentic version of ourselves.
That's interesting because, I mean, you've always said that the thing that you've been about is taking that energy of the 60s folk songwriting and kind of mixing it in with the undercurrent of current alternative roots. At what point then did you feel like you managed to strike a balance of that where it felt unforced and it felt organic?
When we recorded that song, I think, when we recorded Moth, we realised, we can actually do what we've always wanted to do, and it's okay. I think before we were you know, when you're trying to find a way to do something, but you just can't find that moment where it all kind of lines up and you get that eureka kind of like, we've done it. We're trying to make that happen. Whereas this happened as like a random kind of, it just naturally occurred, that song.
Yeah. I think also like it actually just being in the recording studio, I think a lot of our songs were written just acoustically. And so like, maybe that's why when we actually did end up going into the studio and sitting with the songs and all that sort of stuff, when we went back in, we had more of an idea of what we were capable of writing all together than we were before going into the studio. We had the time. So I think actually having that space and time to really figure out the sound in itself affected our writing as well.
It sounds like too that even if COVID hadn't happened, you would have probably gone back and changed a lot of the record, because once you have that breakthrough moment, the kind of perspective of everything shifts.
Yeah, I think as well it was helpful because the world stopped, so it was easier to kind of be like, okay, let's rethink. There's no one breathing down our necks at this point. You know, we didn't have a label, and Lucy had that was a song. Moth to Flame was the song that made Lucy want to sign us.
Well, at that point, work with us.
At that point, yeah, work with us. So it all felt like naturally the right thing to do, to kind of take a step back, and like all of us weren't like precious about it. We all obviously subconsciously knew that it wasn't going the right way, and we just didn't know what to do about it until that point. So it was really helpful.
Once you kind of have that breakthrough moment, does that open you up to do something like the covers EP, which came out just before the album?
Yeah, I think the fact that we felt like we'd found our ground in terms of what we wanted, like how we wanted to be, I don't know, like just our songwriting style, that it just felt like a really exciting place to be. And I think giving ourselves that challenge of, well, can we test this with other songs, like other people's songs? It's like finding our own ground in someone else's, like with someone else's song. So I think that was the thing that was really interesting.
Yeah, it was a real challenge. I mean, that was almost harder than recording the album because it was just so out of our comfort zone. And we purposefully chose songs that were so diverse that we still wanted to make it sound like us, you know what I mean? So it was, it was really like fun, challenging exercise, really, that and they're all songs we love, so we're like, if we could make all of these songs sound in the same vein as us, that'd be amazing. I feel like we pulled it off pretty well.
Yeah. Were there any lessons that you took from that process that have carried into your music making since?
I don't know, I feel like we learned more about how to interact and manage ourselves in the studio more than songwriting. I think it was interesting in terms of what we actually focused on in songwriting itself. Like the link between the songs that we chose was always about how we connected with it, and just connection through music itself, and also storytelling, the way that the story's told. It really struck a chord with us.
I think it was an uncomfortable thing for us to do, and we kind of learned that sometimes being uncomfortable can create something, you know, really interesting. And that's what we're going to keep doing in our own music. You know, if we're not sure about something, it's probably something to pursue. Yeah.
Where did you feel most uncomfortable during the process of making this album then? At what moment?
I don't know if it translates. I hope it translates, but I think in terms of how much we were sharing about our lives, but I think in a lot of the songs, there's just so many personal moments and some things where it's like, it's hard to tell these things. But I don't know whether that's something where it's like, we know exactly what that's about. We know exactly.
I think there was an uncomfortable moment when we first came across that kind of way of writing because it was so open, but also, and like hearing those songs back afterwards, it's kind of like, wow, like it was uncomfortable to listen to how you truly felt about things. But once we got into the flow of it and we started writing songs like that, the album just kind of worked and fell into place because of that style of writing.
Also recording.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that we've spoken a lot about is this idea of finding the sound and that clicking into place throughout the process of making this record. But one of the things for me that's really powerful about it is the vocal melodies. And I know you were friends prior to working on this project, but once you started making music together, how long did it take you to find your pocket with the vocal melodies and realize how nicely your voices pair together and find your pocket with that?
I think that the harmonizing came quite naturally anyway, but the double tracking really made us think, oh, okay, like this is, I don't know what it was about your double track vocal, but it just opened up a lot of avenues.
It's also strange that in terms, like the recording process changed how we wrote. I think like once we tried out doing double tracking and things like that, it does inherently change how you write songs, because like as
you've got such a whispery voice anyway, but then to hear that backed up, it just kind of inspired so much more. It was like, wow, I've never heard this much power behind that kind of sound, and then it just kind of inspired we're like, how can we make this move? Because we've got that sonic kind of beauty now. How can we make this move in like a really natural but like effortless kind of way? So we just went like we'd write the song, and then when we were recording, we'd change little bits. We'd be like, why don't we try, that, make that a little bit more impressive, that line a bit more impressive, and that's kind of how the things were created. It was mainly just in the moment.
And also a lot of like, I think in lockdown we watched that Milk Carton Kids at Lincoln Theatre.
Oh yeah,
like over and over again, because it was just insane. Like I think it's one of our favorite performances, and just seeing how they work together and they mold together. I think having that time in lockdown in that tiny space and having to write half the album in that space, it was like kind of serendipitous in that way, because it really made us focus on that as a craft in itself, like aside from the songwriting.
Watching that Milk Carton Kids concert, so many times throughout lockdown, what do you notice on the 20th viewing of it that you don't notice on the first viewing?
There's always something. I mean, it could either be a guitar riff that you never thought about before, or like there's something about their like closeness of the way that their voices like stick to each other that always reminds me of kind of the way our voices stick to each other. And it's like, we could be this good one day. We just keep, we keep doing what we're doing.
I think sometimes as well, like upon first viewing, you witness just how impressive it is. Like you're just kind of stunned by the fact that they can do that sort of thing. And then maybe in the later viewings, you realize all their dynamics, like how they can be soft in one section and harsh in the next. And they flow with each other seamlessly. And I think that like when you pay attention to that sort of stuff and then try to execute it in your own way, you realize just how hard that is and how much work goes into that sort of thing.
It's literally every little line.
It's crazy.
How do you stop yourself getting lost in the details though? How do you sort of get a sense of the bigger picture and how this is going to resonate on a level when someone's listening to it?
I think we've always not extensively demoed songs, so like if we're writing them, it's just important to get to from start to finish, and the harmonies are kind of secondary in that writing process. So you want that story and that power to come through just on its own, just the song itself, and then afterwards it's like, right, there are clearly harmonies in here, like how do we go about that? And that's usually mostly found in the recording process, but sometimes songs demand that process a little bit earlier. But I think that's probably how that's a thing. Sorry, can you hear the dog?
I'm having a way listen to the dog.
Very distracting.
We forgot to mention, we were talking off air, but you both currently live in a dog pound.
Yeah.
I'm calling you from Scotland at the moment. I stay up in Glasgow. What's your relationship to Loch Lomond as a place?
My girlfriend, she lives up there, about 10 minutes away in Dumbarton. So I go up there a lot and know the area quite well.
Because you've done quite a bit of writing up here.
Yeah, like I think there's quite a few. Well, I'd say that probably about 3 of the songs on the album, the starts of them were probably written up there. The thing I love about Scotland is that it doesn't really matter where you are. There's always hills in the background. There's always like the view of nature somewhere. I think that really helps in terms of having a clear space in your head as well. And also, like, no one I know really has a garden. And so it's quite nice just to sit in a peaceful garden with that sort of landscape in the distance.
That's the one thing I found strangest. I grew up in the countryside where everyone had gardens, and then moving to Edinburgh and then Glasgow where no one does. It's one of the things you miss most. Like, parks are great, but it's not the same.
Yeah, it is crazy. And also, like, there's a room in a house that, like, in the distance, like, past all the houses, you can really see. I think there's actually a thing on our Instagram with it, but you can see. I don't actually think it's Loch Lomond. I think it's just the Clyde in the background, and it's so nice. Like, looking across to Greenock, and it's so nice. That it's really nice in that room.
That is the thing that's great about Scotland, is that you can literally travel, within 20 minutes you're outside the city and you're into the hills and countryside. Like
10 minutes away from where Duck Bay is. I don't know if you know Duck Bay, but it's just like really nice, like glass walls and like looking out on the loch. It's just so nice. You just like, and that's the thing, the English countryside is different. Like, I kind of see it as it's just dry. It's just a really dry landscape. But I mean, they're good for different reasons.
Yeah, I feel like Scotland reminds me more of like Scandinavian countries for some reason.
Yeah. Maybe it's the pines.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's strange though, because it is essentially the same country, it's the same island.
It is mad. Really stark differences.
It's funny, you're saying there about the importance of location. If you're surrounding yourself in this beautiful wildlife, it's easier to write, because we mentioned the importance of Moth to Flame earlier on, but that started when you were traveling?
Yeah, it was, it was kind of, I was traveling back down from Scotland to England, and got a book on the way, and it was called Moth to Flame. I can't remember the author. I think it was like Stig something. I can't remember his name. I was reading that, and I just really liked the sentiment of it. We'd already written a lot of songs about the particular subject, and it kind of felt like it was time to let that go. But there was just that element of like, it was just so hard to let go, and how you're drawn to things that just aren't good for you or just unhealthy for your mental state, because your heart's telling you to go there, even though your mind is saying that everything's wrong. And yeah, this book just kind of inspired that. I literally just read a few chapters, and then on my way back up to Scotland, I left it on the plane by accident.
Oh, no.
So, yeah. So I should just get it and finish it. But
I feel like you shouldn't.
Yeah, it's done its job.
Yeah.
That balance you mentioned there between your heart telling you to do something and your head kind of saying the opposite. Mm-hmm. When you're working on music, when do you feel like you listen to your heart most, and when do you listen to your head most?
I'd say we've managed to establish a safe space now, where if we're talking about something that's like hard to talk about, we don't judge each other, so we can actually say everything. I think if there was any sort of air of like, oh, if I say this, he's going to think weirdly, or he's going to think I'm an asshole or something like that, I don't know, we wouldn't get to the crux of the songs the way that we do.
We separate ourselves from it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why, people do resonate with what we write, because we're not afraid to go there. We're not afraid to talk about these things. Sort of like, how some bands, Fleetwood Mac, for example, talked about all of their relationships with each other.
Yeah. And
they made that amazing album, even though it was horrible for them all, And I think that's part of being a good artist, isn't it? It's like you shouldn't sacrifice something for the sake of your art.
I think also it's kind of interesting. I think there might be a mixture of the two because largely it'll be one of us that's going through something. So like the heart kind of comes from the person that's in it, and then the thought process or the mind is kind of from the person that's viewing it. So you get like a kind of more whole or wholesome scope of one situation from us both kind of witnessing the whole thing from being in and being outside of it.
Have you always been able to detach yourself from it in that way and kind of tackle the music in quite an objective way and keep your feelings out of it so that you can be completely authentic?
Weirdly, I have. I don't know why. I'm able to do that and tell, but some people don't like that. I'm able to talk like that to other people. And I think that's something I've had a problem with in the past is some people don't like what I'm saying, or whereas you are kind of, you can be like that in life.
I'm more solitary. I'd say I'm more solitary, so that I wouldn't necessarily share, but I feel like I'd still get an all right understanding. Like I think whenever I went through something emotional when I was younger and still had music, I'd write about it and then I'd have something productive from it and knew from an early age that was how I would deal with things.
Also, you're the friend in life, you know, that if I had like a massive bogey or something, like, it's there. And that's a good, that's a good way to be.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like that in songwriting too, you know.
If it's going to offend you, it's still probably still.
I mean, you have to have a hard skin in this industry. If you want to write some great stuff, you have to be able to take people being like, that shit. Let's try it this way, let's try it that way. And I think when you start to be a bit precious about stuff like that, it becomes quite, you won't go any further, you just need to be striving to be.
But it's just not, it's not as authentic as it could be.
Yeah. That's what I mean, it won't connect,
What about a song like Honest though, when, I mean, I guess to a certain extent you are still writing from your perspective, but you're writing about someone else. Is it harder or easier when it's writing about someone else to still feel so separate from the emotion of the song?
Yeah, I mean, with stuff like that, we don't really spell out. We wouldn't tell that person it's about them.
So do they know the song is about them, or are they completely unaware?
I don't know. It depends how much they read into lyrics, I guess. But it's been a conversation. But I'm sure if they really read the lyrics, they would know it was about them. But like that's like something that was close to us at the time, so naturally we absorbed it, which is kind of, it just came out,
Yeah, I think we were both witnessing the same thing and kind of viewed it in a really similar way with just slightly different nuances, and I think it affected us so much in that way that we both felt compelled to write about it. So we both had our own voice on what was going on.
Did you have conversations about the subject matter before you wrote the song on it?
Sort of.
We kind of were talking about it in our real lives.
Yeah.
We were around this situation and saw that, things weren't okay. And also had those conversations with the person that it was about. And that's kind of what all of those things joined together to kind of create the song, I think.
I think, was it Latchkey as well that came... It sort of was born out of a normal conversation.
Yeah, it was a strange one because we were kind of just chilling in the living room and we knew that we had songs to write, and it was one of those weird ones where it was quite instant.
Yeah, like, that one when the riff came first. I think.
The riff came first, but then also like sometimes you would sing in gibberish or like phonetics to try and just get a melody down or whatever, but for some reason with that one, the first verse was the gibberish, but it made sense to us. Like it was kind of like a subconscious.
And like it weirdly makes me think of my own life in so many ways. Like I love being driven places or being in the car, and a lot of it is about those journeys where you have those really weird, like when you're alone with someone. It doesn't matter who it is, even if it's my mum. It's like, I've got you here now. I'm going to talk to you about something that I want to talk to you for ages about. And it's
a polite trap.
Yeah, a polite trap. There's just something nice about being like, whilst you're moving, it just feels like you're safe because everything you say is almost being like left behind.
But we have
what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Yeah. But we have different opinions of what the song is about. Like, I think that's quite nice or interesting, at least in terms of.
That's how it makes me feel.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I mean though. It's so like it's everyone's life. Like there's something like the way the lyrics in it are so like, oh, I've done that, or that's been me at some point. You know, that everyone sees it in a different way. Which is quite nice, really. It means it has like so. It's like one of those books that you choose the ending of, and you're like, you know, do I turn left or do I turn right? It's sort of like that.
You round the album off on Half-Light. So how did the recording of that compare to the rest of the album? Because it's one that feels a little bit more raw, perhaps.
Well, that one's on tape. Like we kind of like for some reason, like it's kind of just a little ditty, and it definitely always felt like a closer.
Yeah, it just felt like a moment, and we wanted to make it a moment, like all in one.
I'm still like frustrated by it because like I did a rehearsal for it. And it was so good. And then we're like, right, let's do the recording. And then like in the recording, I felt like it could have gone slightly better. But it's just one of those things. It was like, it was important for us that it was a moment and it felt real.
I really love that song. Yeah. That's my favourite song.
It's almost like a very intimate epilogue to the album.
Yeah, and just the lyrics, the way it's recorded, I just love it. And Jack like always cringes. I guess I'm the same with my one, you know.
Yeah.
That's just whenever we go solo on anything, it's just a bit like
just heightens that vulnerability.
Yeah. But I honestly, the lyrics in that song are so good. Well done. Cheers, dude.
Is that where you're most vulnerable on the album, do you think?
That or midpoint, I guess.
Yeah, that or midpoint it's kind of like, I think the weird thing is Half-Light is about Ollie's situation in one of his relationships, but we just come off of like a phone call, and I felt like I was in his shoes entirely, like not in my place in my life at that stage, but just really felt for him. And it all just came out, and I sent it on WhatsApp. We almost didn't use it. Same as Fake Moon, weirdly.
Yeah. I always liked it. I always persuaded you to use it. But yeah, neither of us like our own songs. But the other one does, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of this album, the songs within it, they do look at the more difficult aspects of life and difficult events that you've gone through, which, in this weird sort of parallel, turn into be great fuel for creativity. Can you be happy and creatively fulfilled at the same time, do you think? This
is the question. Because we're both, well, you're actually weirdly in like a limbo now. But I'm incredibly happy now. Like that album for me was therapizing, if it's that word.
It should be.
It therapized me. And like I just feel completely like everything I was holding on to, all those moments, I can now be free of, instead of having, it was literally like I'd been to therapy.
It's turning that sort of thing into something productive and something that you can be proud of. So
yeah, like
you'll never feel the horrible side of those emotions, because you'll remember the fun process of all this all this music that came from it.
Exactly, and it's turned it into good things.
Yeah.
Even though like when I hear it, I'm like, oh shit, I was really suffering. Yeah. I'm like, oh, this is beautiful now. I'm gonna love this album forever. I just feel like that album was very me, and this next album that we're currently writing is going to be Jack's turn. So who knows what's going to happen after that? We'll both be happy and write a really weird pulse.